building and any business in the center of venture capital. I am Alex Edmonds, also known as SupremeRumHam on the internet, and this is the Building and Indie Business Podcast. Okay, so today we're going to talk about SEO in terms of podcasting SEO, how to optimize your podcast website for Google. So there's so many things that I'm going to talk about that I'm not going to list them all. But what I mean by podcasting SEO is optimizing your podcast website for Google. And the reason why I bring this up is because during my research, I discovered that some people think podcasting SEO means gaming podcasting apps to show up in the search results when someone is searching in a podcast app. I don't mean that. Okay, so let's get into it. Why focus on SEO? SEO is automating free traffic to your website, and that means free traffic to your podcast and gaining more listeners. And this is a lasting thing. You can build it up a lot, and you can get a lot of traffic from it. And that traffic is free, and it won't go away overnight. You might eventually see you get 100 views in one night, and then a month later, when you stop working on it, you get maybe 90, then it goes down to 80, then 70. Yeah, so it's very lasting. And then Google now has started indexing podcasts, and they will tell you where your podcast shows up in certain search results for your podcast and how people find it. So right now, if you look at Google's podcast manager, you can see the impressions where people just see it and where people click on your podcast and what episode they click on. So right now, I think mine says it's all stuff about promoting your podcast, like how to promote your podcast, promoting your podcast, and the episodes that they're looking at is my podcasting book strategies, how to create a podcast survey, things like that. Okay, so my goals for SEO are automate my traffic so that I don't have to work so hard to promote my podcast. And my second goal is to get on the first page of the Google search results for the term podcasting book. And so that way more people see the book and more people will buy the book. Okay. So podcasting is based on domain authority, and this is the number that you receive to determine how trustworthy your podcast or not your website is. So it goes from 1 to 100, and I started focusing on this in July of 2020, depending on when you're listening to this. And when I looked at the Open Podcast blog and its domain authority, it was 5 on July 16th exactly. And in 2 weeks, it went to 6, only 6, because I was still learning. But then on August 28th, it jumped up all the way to 15 when that's when the podcasting, or not, the SEO things that I was doing finally kicked in, and my score jumped. So the podcast website, the domain authority was 3.8 on July 16th, and it jumped to 5 in 2 weeks. And then it jumped from 5 to 14 from August 1st to July 13th. So your first building, the first things you do, it'll take about a month to kick in, right? So I want to also bring up the fact that it's not only Google that you're building up these SEO factors for, or your SEO score for. It's DuckDuckGo, it's EcoSci, and it's Bing. So right now I'm seeing traffic from DuckDuckGo and certain search terms like solo podcast. So that's cool. So the most important ranking factors are, and I won't go over all of these right now because I want to go into more detail later. So direct website visits is the first one, and what this is people going in, like typing in baib-podcast.com into the URL bar and going to it directly. So you want to get people to visit your website directly. Then time on site. And what time on site is the amount of time someone is browsing on your website. So the longer you have it, the longer people view your website in one session, the better that looks for Google. And I'll go into some methods I have been using to get people to stay on my site longer. Pages per session is the next one, and this is how many pages someone goes to on your website in their session. So if they go to a solo podcast, they click on Google, they search on DuckDuckGo, and they click on solo podcast, and then they finish reading it, and then they go to the homepage and they read more blog posts that's different pages during the session, right? Bounce rate. So a bounce rate is the rate of people that are clicking on your website and then immediately leaving without doing anything. And so the lower this number is, the better. Okay. Total backlinks. I'm going to go over backlinks in more detail, but a backlink is when people link to your website. So if someone writes a blog post about the Open Podcast community and they post a link to the Open Podcast community, that's a backlink. So total follow backlinks, I'll go over this as well later. Content length, the more content that is written in a blog post or web page, I guess, the better it is. So if you have like 100 words, that's not a lot. So Google will be less likely to rank in their search results. And then security of the website. This is if it gives users a virus or not, it won't rank. If it doesn't have the SSL certificate, it won't rank, because Google wants to have results that won't give people a virus. So basically, domain authority and ranking are all about, is your content trustworthy? Is your content useful? Is your content safe for their users? Okay. So one thing I do is I use structured data. And what structured data is those pop-ups, or those little like square content that pops up when you Google something. So if you Google Kid Cudi, let's say, and you have that little Wikipedia box that shows up in the search results, and then you have those 4 things from Wikipedia that show up, like it'll show little pieces of the content in the web page, like his his filmography, his like background, his early career, those 4 things. That's structured data. So there's different types of structured data, like product, article, video. And so what I do is I structure the podcast episodes as an article. And you want to start doing this as early as possible. So that way Google will immediately index this data, and you'll be more likely to rank for the search result. So I do this manually, and the structured data, you can Google like Google structured data markup helper, and this will help you structure the data. And then every time you have a new page, just take the data that they give you to put into your website and then just change it around and it will index it. So the way I do it is there's name, and I do the title of the episode. I do author, that's my name. I do URL, and this is the page to the podcast the podcast episode website. And then publisher, the publisher is the podcast, so the Building an Indie Business podcast. And then I do image, and the image is the podcast logo. And then article, body, and this is the episode description. So when I say, in this episode I discuss blah 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 blah, this is the article body, right? So yeah, I do this for every podcast episode. On the every podcast episode episode page. Okay. So then there's meta tags, and meta tags are very important. Google will read this data, and they will rank you in certain categories for search terms based on your meta tags. This is probably why I rank in how to promote a podcast, because this is what I use. This is what I put in my tags. I put how to promote a podcast, or like how to promote a podcasting book. So it's how to promote and then podcast, right? So yeah. So the way you want to structure your data is use words that people will Google, and I will go a little more into this later. And so you don't want to put like podcasting book about how to create a podcast and then blah 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 blah. You want to do podcasting book, because that's what people are looking for, right? So I have standard meta tags that I use in every page, and that's podcasting, podcast, comedy, stand-up comedy, and then I do like book, ebook, things like that, and that'll that's because I want people to search for podcasting book and find my stuff, right? And then the book is about stand-up comedy and comedy, so I do those as well. And then others change based on the content. This one will probably be SEO, podcasting SEO, organic search traffic, podcasting, search engine optimization. Yeah, so these are keywords. You want to add them to the head tag of your website, where you would put your pop-ups and your scripts that they give you. So like your Google Analytics script, that's where you put the head, or that you put that in the head tag, and you would also put your meta tags right next to this. Okay, so backlinks. I already talked about what a backlink is. There are two types of backlinks. Three types of backlinks. So there's a follow, no follow, and canonical link. So a follow link is one that will count to your SEO score. And for a follow link, it's better to post a few times in websites that have a strong SEO score or domain authority than post a bunch of times with websites that have a weaker domain authority. So what am I talking about? So let's say you get a backlink in um, in I don't know in I don't know. Let's say you get a backlink in Joe Rogan's website, right? His domain authority must be like 80, and that's very good because it's out of 100. And yeah, so it's better to have that one link than in like 4 to 5 links in the open podcast community where the domain authority is only 14, because Joe Rogan's website is more Google trusts Joe Rogan's website more than the open podcast community website. So that will increase your domain authority more. Now, there's nothing wrong with having both, but if you had to choose between the high domain authority and the low domain authority, go with the high domain authority. Okay. So a couple ways. A no follow link is when it doesn't count to your domain authority, and some websites will set this up on purpose, and they're usually websites like social media. YouTube does this, and some podcast players do this as well. So how do you tell if there is a no follow link? It's very easy. You highlight the link, and then you right click and you go to inspect, and that'll open up the browser tools, and you will be able to see all the code, and then you read the code and you look for no follow. And if it says no follow, that means there's no domain authority, and so you don't have to promote it as much on that website. Although for a no follow link, it's still clickable, right? So you can post it. You just won't go domain authority, but some people might stumble onto it and see your content and become a subscriber. So for example, I still post my links in the description of my YouTube videos, and I just do this because I have over 400 videos, and so there's someone who's going to read my descriptions and click on my content. So yeah, I do that. Okay. So I put it in the show notes because I want people that listen to my podcast to see what I'm working on. And yeah. And then I post it on Dev2 and Growth Hackers, and those give me backlinks, right? And then I do Buy Me a Coffee. I create a Buy Me a Coffee post. That gives me a backlink too. Canonical Link. So what a canonical link is, it says to Google, it says to Google that this content was created here first, right? So I post my art or my blog posts on Hacker Noon, and then I make sure to put the canonical link, and that way that being on Hacker Noon will give me a backlink because it tells Google that my content was on my blog first, and I will get the credit and the SEO juice from Hacker Noon, right? And so the way you want to be sure that your content will be marked as a canonical link is as soon as you post it, you go to the Google Search Console and you request an indexing. So you go to Google Search Console, there's a input. It's a bar that you can input a link, and you input your new link. You click enter, and it'll say request indexing. You click that button, and in a couple hours, it'll index your link, and Google will know that your content was your page was the first to create the content, and so any other content that is created so any other content that you post that same content somewhere else, and you'll get credit for it, right? Because you were the first one to post it. Okay. I hope that makes sense. SEO methods. I add the website to show notes, right? I already said that. Because there are some that will give you backlinks, but not all of them, not a lot of them. And I'm talking about podcast players. And then I add a transcript to the website. And so what this does is it gives me more keywords in Google search results, because it's also based on what's on the website, right? So I tend to rank for weird things, and I will talk about this a bit more later. Okay. I add a transcript. I promote the episode with the website. So, like on Dev2, I don't post the player. A link to like a player. I post a link to the website where the website has an embedded player, and that way when I post the link on Dev2, I get the SEO boost from Dev2 instead of posting the Google podcast link, and I get no SEO boost, right? So another way to get SEO is create a small product to promote, and that way if someone is looking for something related to your product, that'll show up in the Google search results. So for example, if you have a true crime podcast, you can create written summaries of the cases that you talk about, and when someone Googles like those cases, your case will show up, and they will find your podcast, and they might become a listener of the podcast, right? Yeah. And then for finance, what I've seen is that there are a lot of calculators, some type of calculators like retirement calculators, insurance calculators, mortgage calculators. That's one idea. Another SEO method is to interview people, and then you have them promote a link to the interview that is on your podcast website. So instead of posting to the player of the interview, they post the BAIB website on their website, right? And even if the person doesn't have a strong SEO score, when they start gaining more domain authority, the benefits of that link, or like the SEO boost from their website, will trickle down to your website, right? Another thing is to be interviewed and promote your podcast at the bottom. That'll get you more backlinks. And then guest post, as I said, I take my blog posts and I write them on Hacker Noon, and that gives me a backlink. Okay. Another thing is search intention. So you want to create titles based on search intention, and that way Google will know that the content is useful to people based on their searches. So there are 4 different types of there's 4 different types of search intentions, and there's also another one that's not really a type, but it's there. So there's informational, and this is like how to do something. So if you're teaching someone, you want to use how to. There's navigational, and they're looking to be directed to something. So this is like if they search Apple, they're looking for Apple computers. That's what Google assumes. And there's transactional. They are looking for something very specific. So like open podcast community, they're looking for the open podcast community. Commercial, they might be looking for reviews of a website. So open podcast community reviews. And then ambiguous, which is you don't really know what they're looking for, and that might be open podcast, right? Okay. A sitemap helps to, it helps Google index your site more. So if you create a sitemap and you put it on your website, it will help increase index ability and increase your SEO score for that reason. Okay. One strategy I've read about for increasing SEO and increasing backlinks is the broken link strategy. And what the broken link strategy is if you search for content that you've written about, or like where other people have written about it and linked to other content, and you search for all the links that are in that article, you can contact the writer and say, hey, I've written about this content and the link in your article is broken. You can replace it with mine. Right. So that's one strategy to build up backlinks. Another strategy is called the skyscraper strategy, and it's where you find similar content and you find out where it's being posted and post it there too. So like if you find a podcast is in a specific forum, you can go to that forum and start interacting with people, and they will see your content as well. Another factor in SEO is page speed. And you might not be able to speed up your page based on where you're hosted. So that might be a problem. But the reason why page speed is a factor is because if your page is slow, people will not use your website. It's unusable. So your bounce rate will be high. And that is a ranking factor, an important ranking factor, right? So I had a problem with the Gumroad page. I embedded it in both the blog and the open podcast, or not the open, the podcast website, right? So what I did is I removed the white space, which is the space in between the code. That's empty. And then I removed unnecessary CSS, and this sped it up, not a lot, but it made a difference. So the next thing I want to talk about is titles. You want to make your title something that people will Google, and I talked about this earlier. And you also want to name your episodes based on search volume. So, and this is about keywords. So Google has all this information about what people search for, right? And they will give you this information through different tools. So I use Keywords everywhere, and it's $10 for 100,000 searches. It's very affordable and cheap. So every time I want to create a new episode, I search for something. I search like podcasting SEO, something simple. And then if it has, it'll tell me, okay, 100 people search for this a month. And then it'll give me something on the side, like a little box, and it'll say similar searches, and it'll give me like the different things that related to my search that people Google, and it'll tell me how many people Google it a month. And so if 100 searches aren't enough for me, but there's something that's a little tweak to my title, and then I just use that one instead. So if something else is like how to optimize your podcast, or like podcast SEO instead of podcasting SEO, then I would just use podcast SEO, right? If that is 500 searches versus my 100 searches, right? I also create the transcripts and I put that on the podcast website. And the reason I do this is to get more keywords in the keyword search results, and to increase the time on site, because it takes time for someone to read the transcripts, right? Okay, so the Google Search Console, I talked about this a little. You can add your pages to be indexed, and you want to do that as soon as they're created. And then you get to see where people find your page. So it'll show you all the search terms people, that's where your page shows up, right? And then it'll tell you if people clicked on it or if people just saw it and they skipped right past it, which I think is really good. And because of the transcripts, I end up in like weird search results. So when you look at my Google search results, or my Google Search Console, you'll see that I show up for monkey bread software. And that's because in one episode I said Bill Burr, he'll think of a phrase like monkey bread, and he'll work on that material on stage. He'll do like stuff about monkey bread. So yeah. Another method I did was instead of promoting the Gumroad page, the book on the Gumroad page, I embedded the Gumroad page on both my websites, and then I used both my websites to promote the book to get backlinks instead of Gumroad getting the backlinks. So that's another method. Google will rank, or your domain authority will increase if you make your website more accessible. And so one simple way to do this is alt tags. And what alt tags are is they're like captions for your images. It's very simple. This should be a standard thing. To me, when I learned web development, I thought it was standard, but then I learned it wasn't standard. Okay. There's also a problem with alt tags, and I discovered this problem at work. My boss had asked me to keyword stuff images. And what this is instead of having the caption, like for my website, on the podcast website image, the podcast cover, the alt tag is just podcast logo. So what my boss wanted me to do is, instead of doing something like that, she wanted me to like stuff like keywords in the image. So she wanted me to stuff like HR software, or how to hire people through software, things like that. Yeah, so people do that. It's not cool. Okay, conclusion. This is it. This is the longest episode I've ever done, and this is it. Okay, so the more data given to Google, the higher they will rank you, like the alt tags, the structured data. Yeah. And so my domain authority right now, as of October 2020, is not very high because I messed up. I didn't register the domain for the podcast website until March 2020, a year after I started the podcast. I didn't use the podcast website very much until July 2020 when I started working on SEO. I didn't start creating transcripts until August of 2020. I'm trying to figure out how to get more backlinks, because I recently discovered that backlinks is a very good and simple way to increase domain authority. And finally, most of the tips I've learned, I got them from Steph Smith's book. I will link to it in the show notes. If you've listened this far, thank you for listening. Have a nice day. Bye.